handlers and kind of retrained with them as to be the new handler, and you picked up a new dog over there. So, sure enough, off to Vietnam I went in May of 1970, and you learn all these things, like Stevie says, when you're stateside. Well, these are all the basics. That's why they call them basic training, right? These are the basics. This is how you act in this and that and whatever. And Stevie talks about picking up litter and cigarette butts. We did a lot of that when you're in basic training. I mean, they're instilling discipline in you. Well, you know, I thought I was a pretty cocky guy when I went into the service, and so I was always kind of bumping heads with the drill sergeants and stuff. Well, that's not what you wanted to do. I guarantee you, that is not what you wanted to do. So one day I got into some little conflict. Well, they sent me over to the mess hall and gave me a little paring knife and had me peeling radishes for hours. You ever peel a radish with a little paring knife? I mean, hours and hours. So that's the kind of shit they did when you got out of line in basic training. So anyway, I went over to Nam right away. I'm a dog handler, man. I know what to do. I get over there, and so you're in a rear area. You're like in a little city. Really, post office, place to get your haircut, PXs, all this, like little city. And that's a secure area. For the most part, not that we didn't take some mortar rounds down there, but that was a pretty secure area. And then from then, we had a forward area further up into the jungle and the mountains, and we would go there and wait for our assignments. And so you'd be on a list. And when your name came up to go out with a squad, a platoon, a company, you picked up your dog, you got all your dog food and your animal and stuff packed up, and you went out with these companies. So the first time I go out, of course, we went everywhere in helicopters, right? I was in the first air cav. I was a corporal, and you just went everywhere with helicopters because that was the only way really to move around Vietnam. So I got my dog. We're sitting on the edge of the helicopter. Helicopters didn't like to land. They just kind of hovered. You see them in the war movies, right? They're jumping out of the helicopter. So I'm sitting on the edge of the helicopter with my dog, and I got a leash around my dog in my hand. Well, the dog has been through the scenario. I picked him up. He'd been through in the bush a long time with other handlers. He knew what to do, right? So as we got lower, the dog said, "Time to get out." Well, he jumps out, and I'm not ready for that. He pulls me out because I got a leash on him. Onto the ground I go. My steel pot falls off. All the other people are running for cover, and I'm out in this open area trying to get my shit together. And, anyway, so big long story short there, I got in with everybody else and learned a lesson. From then on out, I never had the dog on a leash when we did that. He just sat on the side of the chopper. And I mean, we'd be flying around, and that dog's right on the edge of the chopper, just like you see dogs sticking their head out the window of your car. He'd be sitting right on the edge. You think he's just going to tumble out, right? But never did. But he knew, okay, now we're getting low, and he'd jump out, and then I'd get out. We didn't have that incident anymore. So
You didn't fly with your door shut. You fly. A lot of times you had a runner.
Right.
Your legs were out. You didn't want to be in the enclosed. You wanted to get at.
Yeah.
But
so that was my first experience, and I learned there. And so I go out, and we got into the area that we needed to do a reconnaissance. And so, again, I was trained to walk point for the infantry. That meant that you were first man in line. And another thing is, you never went down established trails. You always cut new trails, because established trails is where they have booby traps and stuff. The tripwires and stuff. So you always cut your own path through the jungle. So anyway, we get out there, and so again, I was walking point for the infantry and right out in front and whatever. So when I got back, the guys that had been in country a long time, that were experienced dog handlers, said, "Well, how'd your first time out go?" I go, "Well, my dog pulled me out of the helicopter, and I was laying out in the open, and then I was walking, point," and they go, "What do you mean you were walking point?" I go, "Well, that's what we were trained to do, to walk point." They go, "You're crazy. You're gonna get yourself killed. You don't walk point. I don't care what they trained you to do. You just let the lieutenant or the captain know, I ain't walking point. You walk about 4 man back, let your dog go out. He's not on a leash no more. And now you're watching your dog for anything unusual he may do. It may be how he does his ears, how he smells, whatever he does that ain't normal, you're on the ground. You know that there's something wrong. Not all the time, but some of the time. Sometimes it just be a fault, what we call false alert. Okay. So anyway, so I'm telling these guys this, and they go, you need to get your shit together, or you ain't gonna make it. So that was kind of interesting. Later on, I went out with a group, and you got C rations. That's what you ate. And you'd have them in a can, and they were nasty. And you might get a pack of cigarettes, and you get some chocolate, and some nasty canned ham and eggs. And it was ugly stuff to eat, right? And so, but if you were lucky, you got a pound cake in a can. And if you were really lucky, you got peaches with the pound cake. Well, this was a treat, right? If you're in the bush, this was a treat. So one day we're out, I'm with my dog, he's kind of running around. This guy, in the infantry, one of the infantry guys that I was out supporting, he got a pound cake. And then he sets it off to the side, he's opening his peaches. Well, while he's not looking, my dog comes and eats his pound cake. Well, now I'm not real popular. I mean, it's almost like this guy wanted to kill me because my dog eats his pound cake, right? Well, being in the dog platoon, we got special rations and special treatment because of the dogs. So we got what was called LRPs, long range patrol rations. So if you ever did backpacking and you got these food in these plastic containers, you open the bag and you heat the water and you mix it, that was a luxury if you had those. So the next time I went out with that group of guys, I loaded up cases of this for my platoon and took to these guys. And I was their buds from then on out, man. I was in with those guys. So that was pretty cool. Well, after I was out in the bush for a while, did a few patrols and stuff, kind of got knowing what's what. We got sent out to set up a fire base like Stevie was talking about, bringing in guns, mortar platoons, and all that. And I went out first with a group, and we did a reconnaissance of an area to make sure it was safe. And after we decided, yeah, it's safe, then they started bringing in and establishing this fire base, bringing in all these guns and equipment with the helicopters, and getting it set up. And we set up a perimeter with claymore mines and all this. So anyway, it rained in Vietnam all the time. I mean, it was a rainy place, and you were wet all the time, and not a lot of fun. But I was we had 2 mortar platoons, and then we had 2 or 3 105s in this fire base. And anyway, I'm sitting with a mortar platoon in an area about half or a third as big as this room, and we started taking incoming fire. And the mortars that they were shooting were hitting short of our fire base. And we think maybe things were wet, whatever. They didn't have their range figured out. Like Stevie said, hit and run was their game. They do that, and then they're in their tunnels, they're in their holes, or wherever they go. And so after that happened, after about 2 or 3 hours, we kind of felt, okay, this is done for today anyway, hit and run. So we're all sitting around and we're talking, and some of these guys only had a few more days left in country. They were going home. And I had my steel pot off, unfortunately. I think sometimes we fed the dog in the steel pot because you had another liner that went over it. Sounds gross, but that's what you did. And then mortar rounds came in again, and they landed right in the middle of us. So 10 of us got wounded. In fact, the whole mortar platoon and myself and my dog got wounded too. Took shrapnel from the mortars. And then at that point, you brace for a ground attack. And so, you're ready to shoot. And it was kind of funny, I didn't mention this, but I took the shrapnel on the side of the head, but I was still conscious. I was still aware. I still had my gun. And so, you got a medic coming around to say, okay, who can I help? And bandaged me up a little bit, and they're asking me, can I shoot? And I go, can I shoot? Just give me some more ammo here, and I'll be able to shoot, that won't be a problem. And so, but now you're waiting for something to happen, which really didn't. It was very little after that, but now you're waiting for the medevac people to come in and take you out. Well, they wouldn't come in until they knew it was secure. And to secure the area, they brought in these Cobras, and these were badass helicopters, man. I mean, they blew up everything, you know. And they'd blow up everything around us, the jungle and everything. And then, okay, when they said, okay, we believe the area is secure, bring in the chopper. So they brought in the medevac people, and chopper landed, and we're getting loaded on there, and the pilot says, well, there's no room for your dog. My dog was wounded as well. And if your dog didn't go with you, your dog was dead. Nobody else could handle it, so they would put him down. Okay, right there on the farm. It was a done deal. And I got to make friends with this mortar platoon, and a couple of guys said to the helicopter pilot, that dog's getting on this chopper. And if it wasn't for those guys, I probably would have left my dog out there. But the dog got on the chopper, we all got flown back to the rear area, got medical attention. And so anyway, I had this piece of shrapnel on the side of my head, and the doctors decided it was better to leave it than take it out at that point. So I went back to my platoon after I got out of the hospital, and it was kind of the norm. If you got wounded, if there was some rear area job you could do, they would pull you from the field. And so they come around, they had a couple things. They needed a motor pool person, and they needed a clerk, a company clerk, which took care of all the paperwork, picked up the mail during the day, because now you're back in that little secure city. And so they asked Nelson, this buddy of mine, hey, can you type? He goes, no, I can't type. And I could see the writing on the wall here. When they asked me if I could type, I'm going to tell them I can burn up this typewriter, man. You know, I'm a typing son of a gun. You know? So sure enough, you know, they come to me, can you talk? I go, oh yeah. So they said, okay, you're our new company clerk, right? So I said, okay, this is great. So they took away my rifle, they gave me a 45 to wear on my side, and they gave me a Jeep so I could go pick up the mail and do all my errands around the rear area there in our little city. And so that's what I did for just short about 6 months. And so I had 9 months in country, and President Nixon decided we need to end this conflict. I mean, we got into that conflict in the early 60s. In 75, we finally pulled out completely. But in 71, when I was still there, Nixon said, we need to start pulling troops out. And so I had 89 days left in country, and all of a sudden, they said, we're going to take away your dogs now. You're no longer going to be a company clerk. We're all going to send you back to the field in the 101st Airborne Division. It's not where you want to be. That was a really bad place to be. And so I'm sitting there going, this is no good at all. You know, this is bad. So I went back to the hospital, got my original doctor, and said, look, man, I've got less than 90 days left in country. They want to send me back to the field now. And I still had shrapnel in there. I said, can you remove that and give me a waiver for my last 90 days so I don't have to go back to the field? Because nobody wants to go back to the field. And he was from Huntington Beach, California, and I happened to be from California. He said, yeah, no problem. We'll do that. So I went through operation. They took it out. And while I'm in the hospital, another friend of mine that was at a higher division level, that was a company clerk, he came to visit me and he goes, hey, there's a rumor that if you have 90 days or less left in Vietnam, you're going to go home. Well, I had 89, right? And I'm thinking, oh, this can't even be true. I don't even, you know. He said, so how many other people in your platoon have less than 90 days? And I said, I think there's 6 or 7 other guys. He goes, give me their names and information. So I did. They came to the hospital and I got all that and gave to him. He come back a couple days later and he says, I have orders on my desk for all of you to go home. That was huge. You're leaving country. You're going home. So they took my dog at that time and put him over into another area and retrained him to be more involved with tripwires and booby traps and that type of stuff. And so it's kind of funny. So we got orders to go home and we're all waiting. And actually, about 5 out of 7 of us had left country, knew they were home, and we're still sitting in Vietnam waiting for our orders to come through. I'm going, this is crazy. All our buddies are already home and out of the service. We're still sitting here. So finally we got our orders, and I didn't mention this earlier. So you go out to Tan Son Nhut, it was the air base that we flew out of, and with big commercial planes. That's how you came in and out of Vietnam in regular airplanes. So the plane lands, we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. They come and tell us there's a problem with the airplane. Hey, you gotta be kidding me. Well, the enemy loved to see these big planes sitting on these runways, because then they're gonna start throwing in mortars and shit again, right? So we're sitting there going, this can't even be happening to us. Well, in reality, time passed, we got on the plane, flew home. And once I got home, they said, well, look, if you got less than 5 months left in the service, we're gonna let you out. And I had less than 5 months, so I went to Oakland, California, processed out of the service. And what was interesting is I didn't inform my parents that I was coming home. They thought I was in Vietnam, when actually I was sitting in Oakland, California. And they owned a bar and a restaurant, and sometimes my mom would be a little grumpy because the bartender would be calling about somebody wants to borrow money or whatever. And so I went from Oakland on a bus to my parents' restaurant and bar, and walked in, and of course the bartender knew me, and he goes, you gotta be kidding me, he couldn't believe, here I'm standing in their places, but everybody thinks I'm in Vietnam, right? And so he calls my mom, and she's grumpy on the phone, said, what are you calling me this time of night for, this and that? And he said, well, there's somebody here you might wanna really talk to. And she's still going, I don't want to talk to anybody, it's late at night. And she goes, I don't know, you might want to talk to this person. So I got on the phone, of course, and then there was a major breakdown with my mom and dad. And they showed up down there, and at that time I was of drinking age by now, so I took advantage of that. Free alcohol as well. But anyway, so, that was kind of my experience. And one thing I want you to think about is that, again, after I got out of Nam, I realized the importance of the education. I went back to college, I got a 4-year degree, paid for a lot by the military. We have benefits now, like through the VA for healthcare and stuff. And so there's a lot of benefits. And like Stevie said, you have an opportunity to get into areas that don't have those type of conflicts and see the world. The trouble I'm having today is all the conflict we have internally in the U.S. And when you watch the news and all of a sudden you see that Asian people are being targeted in San Francisco, and black people here, and Muslims over here, and all this violence that is going on against different ethnic groups. Well, when you're in Vietnam, I met people that I probably would have never talked to on the street. I mean, I was like Steve, I wasn't around a lot of black people that you never talked to, but when you were over there, you were a team. And if everybody didn't cover everybody's butt, you didn't make it. That's what you had to do. So you become very close to a lot of people that you would have never probably ever talked to in some other situation, but now you're all buds, right? Now you're all taking care of one another. So that was something that stuck with me for a long time. And I stayed in touch with some of those guys for a while, but as time goes on, everybody, moves on to different things. But that was kind of my experience. Like Stevie said, not only did you have the enemy to worry about, you had the snakes, and you had the leeches. You'd walk through water and you come out and they'd be leeches, stuck to you everywhere, and you had to keep care of your feet. If your feet went bad, you got what they call foot rot. You always carried a lot of socks. That was one thing you carried with you. Of course, I had to carry all my dog food, extra water, and a lot of times they'd call you out, and you might be with a company, which is about 80 people, or you might be with a platoon that's like 30. And the LT or the captain would say, how much ammo are you carrying? I said, 4 magazines. It was 4 magazines, that's ridiculous. You need to carry all this extra ammo. They wanted you, as another person, more so than use the dog. They wanted you to carry ammo. They wanted more ammo. I said, no, I carry 4 magazines because I don't expect to be doing any shooting. You're covering my butt. I've got the dog, only in a rare instance am I going to be pulling a trigger. And so it was kind of weird because now I'm a corporal. I'm about as low as can be as a non-commissioned officer. You're telling this captain, lieutenant, no, I ain't doing this. I ain't doing this. I ain't walking point. I ain't carrying this ammo. This is what I'm doing. And so it was kind of funny in that respect because, as you go through the military, they're teaching you, man, you answer to the hierarchy, and you don't question them. I mean, in stateside, you didn't, real quick, I had one instance, I told you about the radishes. Well, one day in basic training, you had your LT, your lieutenant, but then he had a first sergeant or something that worked with him, right? And going through basic, our first sergeant, he was this big black guy, he's huge. And one day, I get in it with my lieutenant, we're having a little scrap. And this guy come over to me, this first sergeant, and grabbed me by the back of the neck and threw me on the ground and put his foot right in the middle of my back and he goes, "Are you messing with my lieutenant?" And right then I know the answer better be no. I'm sorry, man, It was as scary as being in Vietnam. So a lot of that stuff did happen, like that. And so anyway, that's kind of my experience. And any questions?
You've listened to our spiel a couple times. Is there anything you think we should talk about? We've been through this about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
I'm forgetting things and
I just love
I
the
think
stories.
one thing is